Hello, and welcome to 14ers 101, your guide to getting ready for hiking your first 14er. My name is Leigh, and this video is going to cover training. Now, I'm not a personal trainer or fitness instructor. I'm sharing with you things I've learned through experience and research. Your training is your responsibility, and you should always consult a fitness or medical professional if you have health or injury concerns. If you're watching this video, you might be wondering if you're in good enough physical shape to hike a 14er. You may already be a fit and active person, or maybe you're wanting to set a goal of doing a 14er as motivation for starting a fitness routine and getting in shape. Either way, knowing which aspects of your fitness to focus on can be helpful in getting yourself ready. First, it helps to understand what you're prepping for. 14ers are a bit different than your average day hike. 14ers, as the name implies, are at a higher elevation than many people are used to, and often have pretty steep trails to gain all of that elevation. They can take anywhere from 4 hours for the shorter, easier peaks to multiple days depending on your objective. And because 14ers tend to be a bit more remote and can leave you exposed to the elements above treeline, many people bolster their emergency supplies, which can result in a slightly heavier backpack. So, when you're training for a 14er, you're preparing yourself physically and mentally for a hike that is longer, steeper, and higher in elevation than your average day hike, with a pack that might be heavier than you're used to. Here's what I'll cover in this video. I'll start with some benefits of training, then head into recommendations, which includes aerobic-based training, strength training, and training hikes. I'll also address training with limited resources. Then we'll finish with an inspiring story and some resources that you might find helpful. With that, let's dive in. Some people feel like they don't need to bother with training, and that may or may not be true. It's absolutely possible to hike a 14er without any training, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be enjoyable. I didn't train for my first 14er trips. While I loved the views and the feeling of accomplishment, they could be a bit rough. I always lagged behind my group, and I'd feel totally wasted for days after the hike. Investing time for training has completely changed my 14er game and really expanded what I'm capable of achieving in the mountains. Taking the time to put in the effort and train has a lot of benefits. If you take the time to train, you'll probably feel stronger and more prepared on your hike, in addition to reducing your risk of injury and increasing your chances of having a successful summit attempt. After such a big hike, you'll need time to recover. Training can reduce the amount of time it'll take you to recover after the hike. Before getting into any training recommendations, I want to recognize you as an individual. Every person is different. Every body is different. We all come from different experiences and start with different levels of fitness. We all have different lifestyle habits, different daily responsibilities, and different access to resources for training. All of this to say, you should do what works for you and your body, your schedule, and the resources that you have available. Doing something is better than doing nothing, so don't let worrying about having the perfect training routine get in the way of just getting out there and being active. We all start somewhere. All right, let's dig in. If you're starting from a low level of fitness, or you've been really focused on strength training or high-intensity interval training as your main form of exercise, then developing your aerobic base will be the best place to start. Aerobic exercise uses oxygen to burn fat, allowing you to sustain an easy to moderate pace for extended periods of time. Improving your aerobic base will improve the efficiency of this system to provide energy to your muscles all day long. You do this with aerobic or cardiovascular exercise, and it really doesn't matter how you do it. You could walk, run, bike, row, or swim, anything that gets your heart pumping and that you can sustain at a consistent pace for longer durations. I am out for a brisk training walk, carrying my rucksack to make it a little harder. Just going for a short walk, 45 minutes or so. Got a lovely view of the mountains to keep me motivated. If you're just getting started with this type of training routine, here are some tips to help you be more successful. First, choose an activity that you enjoy doing. You're more likely to stick to your exercise plan if it's an activity that you actually like to do. Start small. You can gradually build up your aerobic endurance over time, but injury or burnout is a real possibility if you take on too much too quickly. Make a plan. Scheduling your workouts and prioritizing that time for you can help you maintain accountability, especially when consistency is so vital for aerobic training to be effective. Plan in a warm-up and a cool-down. These are important in preventing injury. Variety is a useful tool. It can help you alleviate boredom in your workouts and give you an opportunity to use your muscles in different ways, so don't be afraid to mix up modalities. Also, you may need to pay more attention to nutrition and hydration since you may be sweating more and burning more calories than you're used to. Finally, make sure to listen to your body whenever starting a new fitness routine or practice. If you start having negative changes in your mood or you're having excessive fatigue, it might be a sign that you're overtraining. You may need to give yourself some rest and then come back to your training more gradually. Once you've spent some time developing your aerobic base, a good next step is to add in some strength training. Strength training can be done in a variety of ways to fit your needs. It can be done at home utilizing YouTube videos and body weight exercises, or it can take place at a gym, potentially with the help of a personal trainer. You might even be able to utilize strength training classes if they have some in your area. However you decide to incorporate strength training, you'll want to make sure to start at an appropriate level for you and your current level of fitness. It's wiser to ease in with body weight exercises and work your way up after you've developed good form and technique. Here are some hiking-specific areas you can focus on in your strength training routine: your core, quads, glutes, calves, and general upper body strength. Your core plays a huge role in balance and stability, which is important when you're walking on variable terrain like rocky trails and when carrying a weighted backpack. When strengthening your core, you want to look for exercises that will focus on strengthening your transverse abdominis. This is a muscle that's sometimes referred to as the inner abs, and it wraps around your core almost like a corset. This muscle really plays a role in stability. Planks, dead bugs, hollow body holds, windshield wipers, and trunk rotations are just a few exercises that will work this muscle. Quads can be strengthened with exercises such as squats, lunges, and step-ups, and there are many variations within each of these categories. For example, with squats, you might utilize split squats, goblet squats, squat holds, or squat jumps. There are a lot of variations to choose from. The glutes are a commonly neglected area for a lot of people, but they play an important role in preventing lower body injury. It's not uncommon, especially with women, to have an imbalance of quad to glute strength. Many of us overcompensate for a lack of glute strength with the quads. This can leave us more prone to knee injuries. Taking time to strengthen your glute muscles can really reduce your risk of a lower body injury. Some common exercises for glutes include donkey kicks, fire hydrants, and standing kickbacks. There are also a number of exercises for your quads that also work your glutes. You might be surprised at how sore your calf muscles can be after a hike. Your calves are at work whenever you're on an incline, whether you're ascending or descending. There are a variety of different types of calf raises you can do to increase calf strength. Also, exercises that have you jumping on your toes will work your calves as well. Your lower body isn't the only area that needs attention when it comes to hiking. Your upper body gets involved too. This might mainly be in the form of helping distribute the load from your backpack, but if you use trekking poles at all, you can also use upper body strength to help with balance and with upward propulsion. General upper body exercises such as push-ups, pull-ups, and tricep dips can quickly increase your strength in areas such as the shoulders, upper back, and triceps. If you're new to strength training, here's a few tips to help get you started and to prevent injury. You can utilize the internet. It's really easy to look up exercises for specific muscle groups online, but make sure you understand good form and technique whenever you're learning a new exercise. Start with body weight exercises. Before adding weight to any exercise, take time to work on your form and technique and develop a basic level of strength. Correct form and technique are pretty critical in getting the most out of your strength workouts and preventing injury. Gradually add or increase weight after you've solidified your form and built basic strength. Variety is important. Your body gets used to certain exercises as they are repeated, and changing up the exercises requires your body to keep adapting. Give yourself recovery time. It's generally recommended that you give your muscles at least 72 hours of rest between strength workouts for the same muscle group. If utilizing a personal trainer is an option for you, this is a great way to learn about strength training with a trained professional who can help you with form and technique to prevent injury. If you'd like help getting started on your own with a strength training routine, Uphill Athlete has provided 3 sets of at-home strength workouts that you can choose from. These workouts do a great job of modeling how to structure a strength workout as well, with a warm-up followed by repeated sets of exercises a certain number of times. These workouts are shared on their website, and I'll include the link to those in the description below. As you develop your aerobic base and basic strength, you might decide to start testing out your abilities on some training hikes. Training hikes are a great way to assess your fitness level as you build up towards attempting your first 14er. They can help you see where your training is paying off and help you figure out your areas to keep improving. Training hikes can also be incorporated as part of your regular fitness routine if you have them accessible, as you can start with easier, shorter hikes and gradually work up the length and difficulty as you get stronger. If you're able to utilize hiking in your training journey, here are some variables that will be important to think about along the way: mileage, duration, elevation gain, altitude, and pack weight. Each of these variables will play an important role in your training, in addition to having a different effect on your perceived level of exertion and bodily fatigue for the hike. Unless you're already a runner or hiker, most of us don't spend a lot of time thinking about how many miles we can hike, run, or walk at a time. Many of you thinking about hiking your first 14er may need to build up your ability to hike for longer distances. You can do this by starting with shorter hikes and slowly increasing your mileage over time. For reference, the standard routes on Colorado's 14ers range from 4 to 24 miles. That's a pretty big spread, so knowing what your end goal is, as in what route you want to hike and how long it is, will be helpful when planning your hikes. While mileage and duration are closely related, there is something important about that relationship that needs to be acknowledged. The amount of time it takes you to walk 2 miles on a flat trail or around the neighborhood is not the same amount of time it will take you to walk 2 miles on a 14er trail. The terrain, which can be rocky, the incline, or how steep the hike is, and the altitude, mostly above 10,000 feet, will all slow down your pace, and potentially pretty dramatically. So keep in mind that preparing yourself mentally for the longer durations should be a part of your training. Elevation gain is an important variable in hiking because it tells you how much upward propulsion you'll need to be prepared for. For reference, on Colorado's 14ers, the standard route with the least amount of elevation gain is on Mount Evans with 2,000 vertical feet. Pikes Peak has the standard route with the most elevation gain, 7,600 feet of vertical. As with mileage, you can see there's a big spread for total elevation gain on Colorado's 14ers. And again, knowing the elevation gain for your goal hike can help you be more precise with your training plan. Elevation gain, when combined with the route's mileage, can also be used to tell you how steep a hike is going to be. For example, if your hike averages 500 feet of gain over 1 mile, that's the equivalent of about a 10% incline on a treadmill. The average elevation gain on the 14er standard routes is 881 feet per mile, or almost a 16.7% incline. Most treadmills don't go above 15%. To determine the average gain of a hike, you just divide the amount of elevation gain by the one-way distance from the trailhead to the top. If you know the average elevation gain of your goal hike, you can use training hikes to work up to a similar level of steepness. When it comes to altitude, you probably know that elevation can have a huge effect on our perceived level of exertion. We can also experience altitude sickness, which I'll talk about more in a later video, regardless of how fit we are. If at all possible, it's wise to plan some training experiences at higher elevations. Everyone reacts to altitude differently, and it can be really helpful to know how you and your body are likely to react. Some people don't really feel affected by altitude, while others will find hiking above certain elevations to be really difficult. Practicing at elevation can be another aspect that's beneficial for your mental preparation. If you're able to experience how much altitude slows you down, you can use that experience to help you be more mentally prepared for what it will feel like on your 14er hike. Training hikes are also useful for practicing with a weighted pack. When we hike 14ers, a lot of the time we are carrying some extra food, water, layers, and emergency supplies, since the consequences of a mishap can be a bit higher than on your average foothills day hike. It's wise to work up to practicing hiking with the same amount of weight you'll be carrying on your 14er trip. The easiest way to do this is to just pack your backpack with everything you'd plan to take on a 14er. Keep an eye out for the upcoming video on gear for my suggestions of what to carry on a 14er hike. Finally, I want to point out that training hikes are a really good opportunity to streamline other aspects of your hiking technique, like nutrition, hydration, and familiarizing yourself with your gear in a lower consequence scenario. Use these hikes to experiment with different hiking foods and hydration practices to see what works well for you. Familiarize yourself with your gear, break in hiking shoes, figure out how to properly adjust your backpack straps, experiment with trekking poles, and see if you like carrying water bottles or using a hydration bladder. Find out what you like best. Try out different hiking techniques. Do you like to take frequent short breaks or less frequent but longer breaks? Use your training hikes to experiment so that you can know what works for you when it's time to head out on that 14er. One particularly useful source for training hikes, in my experience, is AllTrails. I have no affiliation with them, I just find their filter function to be a really good tool for finding trails to meet specific needs. AllTrails has an app and a website, you can register for free, and you can use it to search for hikes in your area. The thing I really like about AllTrails is the filter function. You can search for trails in certain areas, filtering for routes with a specific amount of mileage or elevation gain. And after everything I just shared about training hikes, I'm sure you can see why that'd be a useful tool. Now, having access to trails isn't a luxury we all have. If this is your case, you get to exercise some creativity. There are ways to simulate mileage, duration, and elevation gain without the luxury of trails. Going for long walks around the neighborhood, around a track, or on a treadmill are all options to build up your mileage and duration tolerance. Finding long staircases, either indoors or outdoors, can be helpful to practice for the elevation gain on a trail, although you may need to repeat going up and down a number of times to simulate a longer climb. A stair climber machine is also an option. If you live at a lower elevation, it can be hard to truly feel prepared for your first 14er hike. One tool to help you feel more prepared is the 125% rule, which you can use to help design a training plan. Thank you to Short Guys Beta Works for this idea. This rule basically says that if you can complete a hike that has 125% of the mileage, elevation gain, and pack weight of your goal hike, you should be prepared for your goal hike at a higher elevation. So let's say you want to hike the standard route of Mount Elbert. That route is 9.5 miles long with an elevation gain of 4,000 feet. And let's say your pack will weigh 15 pounds. While training, if you can work up to completing a hike that is 125% of those statistics, or 11.9 miles, 5,000 feet of elevation gain, and with a backpack that weighs 18.75 pounds, you should be able to feel confident in your ability to hike Mount Elbert via the standard route. You may have to get creative in how you achieve that amount of elevation gain or mileage, perhaps by repeating a certain trail or hill a number of times, but it is possible to train this way. And just to emphasize that it is possible to successfully train at lower elevations and without having access to a variety of trails, let me tell you about Daniel Hobbs. Dan is the current record holder for completing all 58 of Colorado's 14ers, unsupported, in the shortest amount of time, 14 days, 17 hours, and 33 minutes. How did he train for this? He trained in Bloomington, Minnesota, a town with an elevation of 827 feet, by hiking the local ski hill, which ascended a grand total of 140 vertical feet. He climbed this hill a lot. This record was an amazing accomplishment in and of itself, but the fact that he was able to train in the way that he did just goes to show you. Creativity and dedication can be enough to get you there. If you'd like to learn more, here are some of the resources I've used to learn about training over the years. Roar by Dr. Stacy Sims. This book is for women interested in learning how to work with their female physiology to get the most out of exercise. And I love how Dr. Stacy Sims claims that you are an athlete if you exercise on purpose, meaning this is really for every woman out there who likes being active. This book talks about things like women's specific nutrition and hydration, and includes advice about how to exercise during different phases of your menstrual cycle. She also has advice for moving through menopause and pregnancy. I've read this book 3 times, and I'm sure I'll read it again. Every time I do, I pick up new information. The next book is Training for the Uphill Athlete. Now, this book is intense and probably unnecessary unless you really get into hiking peaks, but it does have some pretty fascinating information. In reading this book, I learned about how metabolism and fitness are related, how to utilize heart rate zones for aerobic base training, and about strength training for sports like mountain running and ski mountaineering. It also gives guidance on developing long-term plans for goals like ultramarathons and skimo races. They have a website as well, uphillathlete.com, which has good articles on many of the same topics as this book. On a much more personal note, this is The Book of Boundaries by Melissa Urban. This book is not about hiking. Your desires and your time are valuable, and you deserve to take time for yourself to train for a 14er if that's your goal. If the idea of setting aside time for yourself gives you anxiety, maybe because you feel like you have too many other obligations, or because a family member or friend, or even your boss or coworker might be taking more time from you than they should, or because you might be confusing self-care with being selfish, then this book is for you. This book can help set boundaries with others around your workout time. This book teaches about what boundaries are and how they can help you feel empowered. It talks about identifying places in your life where boundaries might be applied, and then gives a ton of example situations and scripts for how to enact those boundaries. I highly recommend the Book of Boundaries. Short Guys Beta Works, previously mentioned regarding the 125% rule, provides a lot of educational materials about mountaineering. They have a ton of content on YouTube and on their website, and you can totally peruse their videos and find useful bits of information. They do tend to focus on more technical mountaineering, but there's still good information there worth checking out. Finally, Google and YouTube are also great resources for researching training ideas, especially different strength training exercises. So there you go. If you're brand new to the idea of training, I hope this video gave you some ideas about how to get started. If you already have a regular fitness routine, I hope this gives you some ideas about how you might make changes or additions to your training to help you feel more prepared for a 14er. Just remember, start slow, listen to your body, and pay attention to form and technique. If you get an injury from poor training, you won't be doing any 14ers. Keep an eye out for my next video, where I will be digging into the topic of gear. Good luck, and get out there.